Why do you guys think it's a problem to be affectionate in many of our cultures? Like, why is that a bad thing? It's definitely not in the Sunnah.
Right.
The Prophet ﷺ was very affectionate and, made contact with the Sahaba, played with Al-Hasan al-Hussein and other children. So why are we saying, well, we just can't do that? Why do you guys think that we're held back?
Well, I think if you're a kid, you think it's gross that your parents are doing that stuff.
No, I think it may be that way. I think a lot of it has to do with the ultra conservative upbringing of not being fully transparent with children. I personally think when we're affectionate with our spouses, our kids, they see that and they see the love. Like anytime even just I give my wife a hug in front of my daughter, she smiles. She likes it. Because she sees that communication. Obviously, for my, our parents' generation, without mentioning specific examples, that was a really weird thing because they never really, and I think it leads back to not being able to talk to them about anything really because we never got any talks, which is fine. May Allah reward them for the monstrous amount of work they did for us, coming to this country. But we never really got any talks. It was known as the S word, and you never really talked even to them about marriage. If you did, it was super uptight and uncomfortable, and that relationship shouldn't be uncomfortable.
Oh man.
And I never, I found out everything either in school through friends. I never really had an opportunity, but that's just the way that generation was, which is totally fine. But I think it became very weird. But with our kids' generation, it's based on their upbringing, right? If they see their parents affectionate, and it brings more love into the family,
right? But some of my friends have told me that their wives, because they grew up in that conservative environment, they never got that talk, and as a result, they became like prudes. Right? I mean, just to be blunt about it, they don't like doing certain things, and like they're. I mean, a guy was telling me one time how.
Get ready, Karim.
A guy was telling me one time how his wife, how one of the main ways that a girl will get off is oral sex, like vaginal stimulation, right, via the mouth, and she's never down for that. And that's something you would read about. Kama Sutra will probably tell you the basics of that, right? Or even he would tell me, his coworkers would tell me that's how you do it, man. And he's like, no, man, right. she's not down for it because that's considered something weird and gross because of her upbringing. So I definitely think that. And that's not just one person telling me that. I mean, I hear that a lot.
Guys, I'd like to announce the destruction of Mad Mamluks from today.
And then but as
associated with me now.
But as a result, the sister's not getting her, climax, right? And now she's like, well, this stuff is boring. Why do I want to do it? It's a chore. Now it becomes a chore for her and she's too prude. She's too much of a prude to experiment a little bit. I'm sure there's more to it, but that's how the guys are seeing. That's how a lot of guys are seeing it too.
Akramakum Allah. Yeah, I mean, I can relate. I remember once I was, giving a seminar on relationships, and there were questions at the end, and one brother, I didn't get to him. He had his hand up in the back, sitting next to his wife, and, the time was up. And then he came up to me after alone, and he's like, yeah, brother, I had a question, but you didn't get to call on me because the time was up, but I wanted to ask, why doesn't my wife give me blowjobs?
Wow. Wow. All right, Karim, you went up to him, Karim.
Thank God you didn't ask that in front of everybody and your wife sitting next to you. And B, his whole thing was is it haram and this and that? And we got into the discussion, and I was like, listen, it's not about an Islamic, it's not about finding your legal fiqhi justification here, right? And this is a sad thing that some brothers do is they play the Islam card, right? Oh, it's your obligation and you have to do this and you got to put out and you got to do what I want because, I'm not even supposed to be monogamous anyways, whatever it is.
Monogamous anyways.
So it's just look at, for example, let's go back to the top needs of research, and even with over 100 couples that I've worked with, very frequently you find with men, it's sexuality, respect and admiration. Those are at the top. And for women, it's affection and care and openness and honesty, you see. So when women feel emotionally validated through affection and care and loving gestures, they will naturally be more inclined to inshallah, explore more of the physical things that men want. And when men feel the emotional connection through their women of being respected and admired, they will also naturally want to perform and do things that please their women physically. And of course, everyone's different, right? I mean, if you grew up in America and let's say you had a history with pornography, or you've even had relationships, your frame of reference and standard for what is considered healthy sexuality or good sexuality is going to be very different from a girl who grew up and you're the first man she's ever seen or touched or thought about in that way. And so we got to be real here with the variation in our actual sexual education and backgrounds. And sometimes our sexual education is very unhealthy, right? Like we believe our wives are supposed to be porn stars, right? And it's like we also got to get real about that. And there are some women that are actually very flexible and open to exploring, but it's the men that are, very selfish. They're like, thank you, I got what I wanted, and now I'm going to go make a sandwich and watch, Mad Mamluks on YouTube. So it's like we both have responsibility in understanding our sexuality and what pleases our partners and how to, keep things spicy and healthy. And I mean, I love to use the example of, subhanAllah, isn't it true? Umar ibn al-Khattab went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "O Messenger of God, I entered my wife from the back. I think I'm doomed. I'm destroyed." Right? Yeah. And the Prophet ﷺ, clarified. He said, was it from the anal or the vaginal canal? And he said, it's the vaginal. So he said, okay, you're good, But that was something Umar went to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said. Yeah. Would we ever go to Imam and go, last night, I had some, I entered my wife from the back and I'm worried about that, or I tried some new position that seems weird and I don't know if it's halal, or I want to explore oral sex, but I don't know if it's halal. Most of us would never go to a imam and even talk about that stuff. But the Sahaba went to the Prophet and asked questions about that, asked questions about sexuality. We know the man who loved zina. He went to the Messenger of Allah. He's like, man, I love banging chicks, like that's my thing. But I also want to be, Muslim. So what do I do? And the Prophet ﷺ wasn't like, you are disgusting and how dare you, and I'm the messenger of Allah and how do you bring this up? And no, he was an educator. He was a counselor, and he connected on that human level. Yeah. And we know that man walked away saying, I haven't seen a better teacher than the Prophet. And I went in loving zina more than anything else, and I walked away hating it more than anything else. Exactly. So the point is we don't have dialogue about sexuality. Sexuality is mentioned in the Quran, right? Enter your wives like they're a tilth for you, And what's interesting when you know the context here, it's like if a sister who has some feminist slants might look at this verse and go, oh, this is so sexist and blah blah. It's like, well, do you know Asbab al-Nuzul, like what are the reasons why this verse was mentioned? And when actually you learn about it, it's not unhealthy at all. In fact, it's to address the superstitions of the tribes, the Ansar and the Qurayshis, that believe that certain sexual positions meant that it would deform your children, or you're more likely to have a boy if you do this or you don't do that. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was clearing the air and being like, hey, you guys go through the whole Kama Sutra, no problem. It's not going to affect the health of your children or what color eyes they're going to have. So we're missing this, in our, I think, our spaces. And I mean, I would love to get to a point where I could have like a class for men to like men to really, do their best to learn about female psychology, how to please them sexually. I mean, a real like course on how to do that, and vice versa for women, right? It's like women learning about all those things and what does it mean to be attractive, and so on and so forth. And of course, every couple is different. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I definitely have some of them. And I think that if we get started with just kind of general knowledge and literacy about gender needs and relationships and sexuality, then mashallah, we're going to be able to create healthier experiences within the home.
I hope you do start a course, because you're a good looking dude. I take a class with you. Because I think there's another class, like one of our former guests.
What, you're going to make a decision about making a class based on his looks?
Judging a book by a cover?
Exactly. Like, there's like a garment with Sheikh Yasser Qadi. Sheikh Yasser and I've known him for like over 10 years. But I'm like, I'm not learning sex from Sheikh Yasser Qadi. Come on, bro. Like, that's not happening. Like, he's an Akida guy. Like, Hadith.
It's a really good platform platform that he has on that
Like a garment?
It's,
Yeah.
I mean, the videos even they're very good videos. But anyway, go ahead, Sim. You were going to say something.
No, Brother Karim, you made an amazing point that the elephant in the room is porn, and the expectations that we're having for our partners based on porn is problematic. Unrealistic expectations that we have, and that's just a whole nother problem that we're trying to tackle in our communities. And it seems like problem after problem, but how do you address that? That there's so many layers of these selfishness and porn and all these other problems that are kind of leading into or permeating into our marriages. How do we tackle all these different layers?
Well, I mean, you got to start step by step, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do is address every case, based on its context. But, to put a shout out there to my brothers and sisters at Purify Your Gaze, which is a company that I also partner with and do coaching with them. They specialize in sexual addictions for the Muslim community. And so anyone listening out there that knows somebody or is struggling themselves, it's a very common thing. It doesn't mean you're a disgusting, horrible, evil person, but there is help, and it's anonymous, and you will get customizable support through the modules and through the coaching. So Purify Your Gaze is in my opinion a real solution that we have access to today, and it's something that really tries to address just this problem. And addictions in general, of course, because all addictions are the same as far as, the stages or the cycles, whether it's pornography, food, alcohol, drugs, etc. There's usually a deeper wound, emotional wound or void that's trying to be fulfilled to some level. And, the reason why we are addicted to anything is because we want to numb ourselves from our actual lives. We want to escape the pain of our actual lives and find a place of pleasure. So what's interesting is with brothers, for example, and their sisters too, by the way, who struggle with sexual addiction. But for example, with brothers, it's like if they approach their wives and they feel let down, or, they're not interested, or they're too tired, or whatever it is, and this isn't to blame the sisters. I mean, being a mom and raising kids is one of the most difficult jobs in the world, and we can't forget that, right? So it's not like she was at home all day and all she should have been doing was taking a bath in milk and doing her nails for you. It's like she's got tons of things to do for everybody and still be ready for you, right? So we got to have more compassion and patience for our wives and help them find their own self-care. But going back to the pornography, many men, when they don't feel sexually satisfied, they justify using pornography instead, right? They're like, well, it's better than zina. You basically create an unrealistic frame of reference for sexual expectations and sexual pleasure. And so when you go to try the real thing with your wife, depending on who she is, or your husband, you're most likely going to be let down in some situations because pornography is unrealistic. And it's designed to just be about lust and impulsive pleasure and immediate satisfaction. It doesn't necessarily have the aspect of the human emotional connection, which is what you need for real sex, right? Or real making love. Making love, in my opinion, has spiritual and emotional layers to it besides the physical. The physical is just a key to get to that deeper essence of what is it about having sex, right? Because I see sex as a gift of, not to use the word creation, in the sense of it is a creative force or energy. And so that creative force or energy is a beautiful thing. And many of us are taught that you're not supposed to like it. And it's actually a gift that we give. And your sexual charge, like if you're a single brother or you're a married brother or woman, and you see someone you're very attracted to out in public, that you feel this heightened charge in your body. But we're the ones that, we transfer that into some mental fantasy, or it gets locked into our, groin area, and now we're just like obsessed with the sex part. But instead, one recommendation I would offer everybody is think about when you feel sexually attracted to somebody, look at it as this is a heightened energy or charge that you are feeling in your body, and it doesn't have to be released only through a sexual medium, but that's actually a creative force or power that Allah has put in the human being, and you can actually, through breathing, redirect it and give it away as a gift. And so some brothers, for example, when they really don't fall into those temptations like watching pornography, we guide them to take that gift and give it away in a different way. Like, that is energy that we know can be transferred from another form, because we know, energy can't be created or destroyed. So just transfer it. And we don't have to necessarily just transfer it into something haram or watching pornography. So some of these brothers, when they watch pornography, they basically are using it because they didn't feel that connection with their wives or satisfied, but they don't realize that the more you watch pornography as a crutch for when that happens, the less likely you will find that connection with your wife again anyways. And that's a big problem. And it's basically the deep, hole that many people in that journey find themselves in.
And one of the leading causes, I think, to erectile dysfunction too, right? And when
right,
you're with
because
your partner,
you're basically numb yourself, and you need crazier and more hardcore content, because it's like any other drug, right? The dosage that you used to take no longer gives you the same high. And when you watch pornography, we know this, like the brain goes through similar activities as taking a drug. There's the dopamine rush, and of course, if you're masturbating and orgasming, you're actually associating this extremely wonderful natural feeling with something that is on your screen rather than the human being you chose to spend the rest of your life with.
Right. I'm glad Sim had the guts to like bring that elephant into the room. Because that's, a lot of times guys will be like, man, I want to, I saw something in a movie or something, and I want to get it on and get down and dirty on the kitchen table and break a bunch of expensive china. That's like, that becomes your thing. Like, and you're surprised, like, oh my, and then you're like shocked that your wife doesn't want to like break all this expensive china. Like, well, yeah, duh. If you actually think about it logically, like, yeah, why would you want to do that? But in the movies, yeah, because they got budget for that, to break dishes and all this other stuff. As we wrap up, Karim, like normally I always ask, like on a subject like this, I would ask the guest to like give me your takeaways. But what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to like tell you what I think we should be doing, from the guy's perspective, and then you tell me if I'm off base or not. So number one, we talked about the love tank, investing into the relationship, like doing things, for your spouse. So I definitely think that's something that we should always be, like the selflessness that you're talking about. And it reminded me of something I read from I think Sheikh Abdul Hayy Al-Arifi. I think he was a scholar from the subcontinent, a contemporary of Maulana Ashraf Ali Tanvi. He talked about how in his entire life, married life, he was, he never really had expectations from his wife. He always was in a giving mood. And that also like led to her, reciprocating that back. And I think the example that I had with my wife and my mom for the Umrah trip, etc., kind of touched upon that. Also, it reminded me a little bit about the other takeaway was like spiritual development. We had Sheikh Rami and Sur on the show several months back, and he says that one of the prerequisites that he has for anyone who comes to him for marriage, premarital counseling, is a course on spirituality and purification of the heart. Sorry, because and I think a lot of that ties back to that, because if you are working on purifying yourself spiritually through tazkiyah to nafs and training the soul, you're not gonna be like you're gonna be like lowering the gaze, which as a result cuts off you looking at other women and then like fantasizing about other women, etc., and that that dilemma amongst other things. So those are the two things I think people should take. Brothers who are having issues with marriage should take away. Work on your soul, get right with Allah, and number two, start like doing, understand what makes your wife tick. A lot of women, I think it's service acts. It's acts of service. It's going out and like making sure the house is clean and stuff. Making sure that your bed sheets are done, etc. Because guys, we could probably we'll get down and dirty in a dumpster, but women want like they want everything to be they want something to be spotless because that's what they're thinking about, and then they're not going to get off if they've got some other headache that they're worried about, like the bed sheets are dirty, etc. Am I off base here? That's kind of my takeaway from this whole conversation.
Well, it's very important not to generalize, but at the same time we have to, because there are general themes, right? So are all women and men the same with their needs and how you're going to approach them? No. But there's definitely a foundational framework that I think everyone should be, if they're planning to get married or they are married. And that's one of the things that I try to do, with my clients is actually teach them those things, right? So like discussing gender roles and that the fact that there's 100 differences in just how the male and female brain is wired, right? Many of us don't know this. So it's like, if you knew that, you'll be able to understand the masculine and the feminine languages more precisely. And it's like any other science or art, it's a skill that you develop, right? There's a science and an art to marriage, just like there is to the deen. And so I think that, regardless who you are out there and how much even Islamic knowledge you have, you got to actually get back to the human sciences, because this is something that in our community, unfortunately, I always say, like, okay, so we're the religion for all people and all times, but, we're our masters in human sciences and social sciences. We don't have as many as we used to, historically speaking. Other groups and communities are actually on the forefront of human science. And when other people are, they're going to be defining the axioms and the frameworks that all of us will be indoctrinated by when we go to school. You follow? Right. So this is important because we can't act ignorantly anymore. We can't ignore these concepts and skills which are necessary for healthy human relationships. You follow? And so that's my whole thing. And there's a lot to share about that, and I would love to come back sometime and maybe have very specific things to offer. But the first thing I would leave everybody with is learn more about what your husband and wife's needs are. There's questionnaires online. You're more than welcome to get in touch with me. I'm actually in national practice. I do see people in office here in California, but I do video and phone consultations all over the country. So if you're in Chicago and that's something you feel would be useful, no problem. Like, we can make that happen. So I think that just learning the essential knowledge and skills through human scientists, people that have experience in relationships, is very important. And the example I'll leave you with is, God bless our, imams and religious leaders. But, if you have, for example, a woman who goes to an imam and says, hey, my husband's like a real jerk and sometimes he gets aggressive with me. And usually, the response is, oh, well, tell him that the best of you are those who are best to your wives, right? And that's wonderful. That's a wonderful jewel. But when you go home and you tell your husband that, it's not really going to practically change anything. So people like myself and other professional helpers in this regard, they actually try to create a process, a realistic and practical process for how to live that concept, you see. And that's sometimes the difference. The disconnect is we have a lot of wonderful concepts, but we actually don't know how to make them into real action items and experiences. And that's where human science comes in.